When you hear the name Khan, you probably think of Genghis, the founder of the empire, or his grandson Kublai. Yet there are other Khans who make their mark on history, including Kublai's younger brother, Hulagu. As well as founding the Ilkhanate dynasty, he acted as the enforcer of the empire, completely decimating the great city of Babylon and bringing the Muslim world to its knees. Hulagu Khan, born in 1215, was the grandson of Genghis Khan, the founder of the first great Khan empire. His father was Tului, while his mother was a Kedite princess. Little is known of Hulagu's early life, apart from a single anecdote from when he was 9. He apparently went hunting with his older brother Kublai. After bringing home game, he was taken before his grandfather Genghis for the first time and rewarded by the great man. In 1251, when Hulagu was 36 years of age, his older brother Monga Khan became the great Khan to rule over the empire that covered millions of square miles throughout Asia and the Middle East. One of Monka's first acts was to place his brother in command of the Mongol army. Hulagu's mission was to wipe out any Muslim states that still existed within the empire. The force that was gathered was the largest in Mongol history, consisting of 2/10 of the armed forces of the entire empire. Hulagu led this huge army out of Mongolia, and in autumn of 1253, they moved slowly and methodically, putting down any pockets of resistance and swallowing up any Muslim states that still existed. He embraced the job with relish, and over the next few years would lead a formidable army into the most distant reaches of the empire to enforce his brother's dominion. Monka had issued instructions to treat those who submitted with leniency, but to destroy those who resisted. He did so with abandon, building his reputation as a ruthless conqueror. Hulagu and his army arrived in Transoxania, an area of Central Asia corresponding to parts of modern-day Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Kazakhstan. There, he encountered Lurs, an Iranian people living in the western mountains of Iran. These people were quickly subjugated, allowing Hulagu to focus on the destruction of the Nazaris, or assassins, of the Alamut region of western Iran. The famed assassins held possession of dozens of well-defended fortresses. However, Hulagu had now become a master of siege warfare, and he was able to inflict heavy casualties upon them. The newly installed Nizari Imam attempted to negotiate with the vastly superior forces bearing down on him, but without success. In 1256, he was forced to concede while being besieged at the fortress of Mayamumdiz. He came to an agreement with Hulagu by which all of his forces would surrender. As a result, the great Nizari fortress at Alamut was overrun and dismantled. The entire Nizarite kingdom was quashed, although some pockets of resistance remained. Monga Khan later ordered the elimination of all Nizaris, resulting in the death of around 100,000 people. Iran was now completely under Hulagu's control. Throughout 1257, Hulagu based himself at the military headquarters he had established in Hamadan in the western part of Iran. A message was sent from there to the Caliph al-Mustasim at Baghdad demanding his submission. His brother had given Hulagu instructions to destroy Baghdad if the Caliph refused to submit and pay an annual tribute by way of a military detachment. No such submission was forthcoming, and so Hulagu prepared his army to invade Baghdad. By now, he had a force of 150,000 men at his disposal. Baghdad was at that time the grandest city in all of the Middle East. As the invading Mongol army approached, al-Mustasim sent out a 20,000-man cavalry to confront it. The Muslim cavalry clashed with the smaller Mongolian vanguard and defeated it, but then, rather than returning to the security of the great city, they camped out in the open and proceeded to celebrate their victory, apparently believing that they had conquered the entire Mongolian army. Overnight, however, the main Mongol army approached and surrounded the Muslims on one side, with the Tigris River on the other side. In the slaughter that followed, nearly all of the Muslim cavalry were killed, with those not falling to the sword being drowned in the Tigris. Hulagu now set about the meticulous task of laying siege to the city of Baghdad. A wall was built around the perimeter in order to protect the siege engines from the missiles of the defenders within the city. The wall also made it impossible for anyone to escape from the city. When he realized the overwhelming power of the invaders, al-Mustasim tried to negotiate a peace settlement from within the walls of the city, but it was too late. He had been given the opportunity to submit and refused it. Now he had to live with the consequences of that decision. The siege began on January 29, 1258, consisting of siege engine and catapult attacks, as well as massed attempts to breach the city's walls. By February 5th, a sizable portion of the city's outer walls had been taken. 5 days later, realizing that there was no holding back the Mongol invaders, al-Mustasim surrendered the city. It took another 3 days before the Mongols entered Baghdad. Then, for 7 days, the city was systematically destroyed and its people massacred. Only the Christian population was spared. Mosques, palaces, hospitals and libraries were looted and burned to the ground. Baghdad's Grand Library, along with 35 others, was put to the flame, but not before the Mongols had gone through and torn ancient sacred texts to pieces. The leather covers of the priceless volumes were used to make sandals. It was reported that the Tigris River turned a combination of red and black, from both the spilt blood of the slaughtered and the ink of the thousands of volumes that were tossed into the water. The most reliable estimate is that around 90,000 people were killed during the sacking of Baghdad. Caliph al-Mustasim was taken prisoner. After being forced to watch his city and his people be destroyed, he was rolled in a carpet and laid on the ground, whereupon the Mongols rode their horses over the carpet to trample him to death. This was done in the belief that a person of royal heritage, such as the Caliph, should not have his blood spilt on the earth. His death brought an end to the Abbasid dynasty. In the wake of Hulagu's ferocious treatment of Baghdad, the surrounding states were quick to pledge their loyalty to the Khanate Empire. Hulagu then turned his focus to Syria. The Ayyubid rulers offered to pay tribute in order to prevent the destruction that had been visited upon Baghdad, but Hulagu was not interested. The Crusader states along the Mediterranean coast then joined themselves to Hulagu's army. On January 8, 1260, this combined force laid siege to the city of Aleppo. Within 6 days, the city was taken, suffering the same fate as Baghdad. 2 months later, Damascus fell, and with it fell the Ayyubid Empire. The center of Islamic power was pushed back to Cairo. Hulagu was intent on pushing all the way through to Cairo and smashing the last vestige of Islamic resistance. Before he could move in that direction, however, he received the news that his brother, the great Khan Monka, had died of illness while pursuing the Song dynasty in China. This paused the momentum of Hulagu's campaign. With civil war threatening, he headed back to Mongolia with the majority of his troops. Those remaining offered peace to the Mamluks, but they, feeling emboldened now that Hulagu and most of his army had left, killed the envoys that were sent to them. Mamluk Sultan Qutuz assembled his army and proceeded to Palestine to take on the Mongols. Hulagu had left his general Kitbukha in command, and he was now prepared to face the Mamluks. His spies soon reported that the enemy outnumbered him by 2 to 1. Still, he pushed on with a force of no more than 25,000 men. The two armies met in the valley of Ayn Jalut. The Mongols fought courageously, but were eventually overwhelmed by the superior Mamluk numbers. Kitbukha was killed in the battle, along with around 10,000 of his men. In 1262, with his brother Kublai Khan now installed as ruler, Hulagu returned to the campaign. He had inherited the Middle Eastern part of the Mughal Empire, which would become the Ilkhanate dynasty. Yet, his sole focus was now to wreak vengeance upon the Mamluks for destroying his army. His attention, however, was diverted by an internal rebellion, fomented by his cousin and fellow grandson of Genghis, Burqa Khan. Burqa had converted to Islam and was intent on seeking revenge against Hulagu for the destruction of Baghdad. He led raids upon Hulagu's territories. The civil war that resulted marked the end of the united Khanate Empire. Hulagu now sought an alliance with the French against the Muslims. In April 1262, he sent a letter to the French king, Louis IX, proposing the alliance. In the letter, Hulagu stated his intention to take possession of Jerusalem in the name of the Pope, and asked for a French fleet to be sent against Egypt. The French king did not respond, and no European alliance was entered into. Meanwhile, Hulagu led his army against his cousin Berka, who had allied with the Mamluks. The Mongols achieved initial success, but were then driven back by superior forces. Many of Hulagu's men were drowned attempting to cross the Terek River on their retreat. This defeat marked the end of the campaigning for Hulagu. In January of 1265, he became ill and died a few weeks later. The reverence which was shown to him at his funeral is indicated by the fact that it was the first Ilkhanate mourning ceremony to feature human sacrifice. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe. If you have any other suggestions for future topics you'd like us to cover, please leave a comment below, and we'll see you next time on History Junkie.